We tend to think of foreign aid as basically something government does. Going all the way back in American history, foreign aid has been something we the people have done. And indeed, as the Index of Global Philanthropy and Remittances shows so well, we the people do a lot more of it than we in our capacity as the government of the United States do.
There's a blossoming of philanthropy following the creation of greater wealth around the world, plus a deeper exploration about alternative ways of conducting policy or serving people in need beyond the government.
It began with, in part, an instinctive reaction that was completely correct to false charges being made about the U.S. for being stingy in its philanthropic giving. And Carol, she knew it was wrong because she understood that we have a very deep, rich, voluntary sector, and that most of U.S. philanthropic giving isn't mandated by government, it's by individuals, foundations, and corporations.
I had cringed when people started calling America stingy. And when I looked into it, I discovered that it was because the measure that they were using is the government aid as a percentage of a country's gross national income. And because America's economy is so large, when you use that measure, that puts us at the bottom or very close to the bottom. I thought about my own experiences overseas and all of the private voluntary organizations. And so I said, well, how much are they giving since the measure being used was just a government aid measure? And no one knew.
We realized that there was something going on that we had missed in government-run aid programs, and that was private foreign aid. But we didn't know the magnitude of it. We didn't know who was involved in it. We had no numbers.
Our engagement with the developing world is through four main flows. And of course, one is government aid, and one is global philanthropy. The other is remittances, the monies that migrants send back to their hometowns, and private capital investment from companies. So we came up with the concept of total economic engagement. We also really felt it made sense to just tell people that compassion is the work of a nation, not just a government. It wasn't until 2004, Jan Egeland at the UN called the United States stingy, looking at our government aid as a percent of our gross national income.
Carol really hit back against these charges, and there was all of a sudden significant interest in the notion of what private development assistance looks like.
Our data was out there then. The reporters would find out that, wait a minute, there was an argument against calling it the U.S. stingy. We really took off at that point, and I was able then to develop funding sources to put together a full-scale index of global philanthropy. In 2006, we published our first index of global philanthropy.
In order to enable giving to have the greatest impact, it's critically important to have the right data. Without understanding what the landscape is, people can't make the right decisions. And so we were delighted to partner with the Hudson Institute to sponsor the indices. It's critically important to understand what is happening and what the potential is globally in terms of giving.
We're just releasing the new 2016 Index of Global Philanthropy and Remittances, and we're excited that the results continue to show the growth in private giving. For the United States, only 9% of our total economic engagement with the developing world is through our government aid.
It really created a revolution in how overseas development assistance is understood. It got the attention of policymakers around the globe. All of a sudden, it sparked the rise of discussions about the extent of private giving. The major multilateral global organizations, whether it be the OECD in Paris, whether it be the IMF or the World Bank, started to recognize the importance and the impact that this private giving was having.
The numbers it provides have changed our understanding of international giving.
Now virtually every one of these development agencies for the Western democracies now have their own public-private partnership programs, And I think to a great degree that's as a result of Carol Edelman's research and this index, which is read all over the world now.
We realized that we were missing a really important other side of the coin in global philanthropy. And that was what we called philanthropic freedom, or the enabling environment for people to do philanthropy.
With the Index of Global Philanthropy and Remittances, the effort is on understanding the actual numbers, the size of the philanthropic flows. With the Index of Philanthropic Freedom, that looks at the institutional environment around philanthropy, the legal frameworks, the constraints, the incentives, as well as the barriers to philanthropy. So I think having both projects is increasingly important as philanthropy plays a vital role in many nations.
The index isn't just saying you have a score of this or that. A good part of the index is pointing out, using in-country and out-of-country experts to say, here's where the regulation can be shifted or changed in a way that's going to help civil society.
There's so many problems around the world when we look at the issue of closing space for civil society. We're seeing the erection of aid barriers, philanthropic protectionism that's actually restricting the ability of philanthropy to engage internationally, undermining, I would argue, not only U.S. philanthropy, but also undermining outcomes for beneficiaries around the world. So there's definitely a problem out there. The question is, how do you fix it? And that's where the index comes in, because it identifies the concrete issues that are constraining philanthropy.
And I heard from Carol Edelman that she was considering changing her role vis-a-vis the indices. It occurred to me a good home for them would be here. Participating in this, it would not only give a steady base to what is currently going on, but also gives a lot of potential for improvement. I wanted to find a home for the indices where I knew the data would be top-notch and where there would be no question of continuing it and enriching it.
It's an honor for us to be taking it over from Hudson, and we, as the first school of philanthropy in the world, have relationships all around the world, so we think they're going to strengthen those relationships and allow us to help nurture a whole network of scholars and analysts who are working in this area and bring more visibility and rigor and systematic attention to philanthropy and voluntary action more broadly among policymakers around the world.
It's a sign of the continued strong links of Hudson to the state of Indiana. Although we left Indianapolis, we moved our headquarters here, it's altogether fitting in a way now that the index is grown up, the indices have grown up, and they're now kind of adults, and they can now go off on their own and go back to Indiana. Having that imprimatur on the indices will get the message out even further and will help incorporate that kind of thinking into the way the next generation of philanthropists approach the major problems that we face around the globe. I think it's an extraordinary platform, and we're delighted and honored that the Lilly School is going to be taking over these projects.